But what I want to get into, if we can, to kind of just shift, is monotheism and how that came about and how it was based off of the Anunnaki as well.
Okay.
Because that was the first religion. The first religion on Earth, according to the current 7,000 year timeline, the first religion, the first gods were the Anunnaki. Those were who our ancestors worshipped. Monotheism, again, it all pretty much started with Judaism, right? Mm-hmm. That's where this idea of Yahweh, the one single God, came from. But Judaism was formulated not that long ago. It all formulated around 500 BC. Around there, 500 to 600 BC. And it came about after the Babylonian exile, which was a true occurrence in history. So what happened is the Babylonians descended upon all the neighboring kingdoms and started subjugating and taking the elite captive. They didn't take any of the common folk, just the elite. That was their practice. Take the elite captive and hold them or whatever. And during that Babylonian exile, the elite, they were mingling, they were being influenced by what was going on around them, right? And what happened was King Cyrus, the Persian, he came through and he destroyed the Babylonians. And luckily, King Cyrus was tolerant towards other religions. So after he freed the Jews, he said, you can go back home if you want, or you can chill here. And some of the Jewish priests decided to stay. And that's when the Babylonian Jewish priesthood began in Babylon. So there's two different priesthoods. And then some of the other ones went back home. But prior to the Babylonian exile, the Jews were losing their way. They were losing their footing. They were reverting back to their polytheistic roots in the Anunnaki worship. And we're told this in, I believe, Jeremiah. In Jeremiah, we are told, who was a prophet, he was alive during that time. We are told that the Jews, the people, the Israelites were reverting back to the days of their fathers, and that they are worshiping as many gods as there are street names, as there are streets. So that they were reverting back to the Anunnaki worship. So because of that, they weren't fortified, they weren't unified. Everything was just a mess. And that's why they were easily controlled and taken over by the Babylonians. But,
wow.
Yeah, and so during the Babylonian captivity, the priests, the elite were like, man, we can't let this ever happen again. How are we going to come together? And the Bible tells us how this comes about. The Bible tells us why the Torah was written. We are told that the prophet Ezra was given command by Artaxerxes, one of the kings of Persia, to go back to his kingdom, to go back to his people and give them a new law to follow. And that new law was the Torah, the Old Testament. And the reason they did that was so that they can control them, put them together, be unified. So basically, monotheism, Judaism came about after the Babylonian exile as a way to do away with the Anunnaki worship, to do away with polytheism.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So it was a way to basically have security against people taking over your town.
Yeah.
Keep everyone together, unified under one God.
Yes.
Not divided.
Yeah.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, and it gets crazier real quick. So Judaism is all based off of the worship of Yahweh. That's his name, right? Yahweh. But what's interesting is that the worship of Yahweh historically goes further back than the Jews. The earliest inscription of Yahweh that we have is actually found in the Sinai Peninsula. And there was a band of these nomads known as the Shasu who were worshiping Yahweh in the Sinai Peninsula. And we know this because there's an Egyptian text that we found where I think it's Amenhotep III. He subjugated some of these Shasu and took them in as slaves. And he claims that these are the Shasu of Yahweh. And there are inscriptions in the Sinai that state, this is our God, Yahweh, and his consort Asherah. So these Shasu were worshiping multiple gods. To them, Yahweh was just a part of their polytheistic pantheon. And that's interesting because in the Bible, the first time the name Yahweh is given to us is in Exodus to Moses in the Sinai desert. So the Bible is also reflecting history. The Bible is telling us that the name Yahweh, this one God, was given to Moses in the Sinai desert, where these people were already worshiping Yahweh. And so it's just more proof that all of this is just based off of the Anunnaki worship, the Anunnaki mythology. And it was just slowly fortified, slowly perfected until after the Babylonian exile, when all of those kingdoms were gone anyway, where they said, you know what, let's take all of this and let's create our own thing, our own kingdom, our own religion, and let's go forward. Because at that time, the Sumerian kingdom was already was way gone. The Akkadian kingdom was gone. The Babylonians had just fell. The Assyrians were gone. So all that was left really were the Jews and some of the neighboring kingdoms, and then the encroaching Greeks. And then slowly through time, after that all fell, it was the Christian empire and the Jewish empire. Everything else had already pretty much crumbled.
Right.
And at that time, the Christians utilized the same blueprint because they were dealing with the pagan religions. All the pagan religions, this and that. So they said, you know what, let's, get rid of all of that. Let's just all make it one thing, Christianity. And what they did is they created a power shift. They said, instead of having to go through Jesus, to find God, you have to now go through the Catholic Church. They created a mediation, because before the original Christians, they didn't go to these big churches or anything like that. They just worshiped together, communal. They were hippies. But the church came through and stamped its boot and said, no, now you have to go through us. We are the mediators between heaven.
I wonder who the first person to come up with the church was.
Yeah, well, technically they say
when was the first church?
It was, I believe, in Syria.
Really?
Yeah, but technically Paul was like the first one. Paul was the first one he's the one who created the Catholic Church, or the church, and then after him were the apostolic fathers who followed after him in line, kind of the same way that the Jews do with the rabbis. There was like an original rabbi, and ever since him, it's been like a succession.
Right.
But basically all this stuff, man, all of this stuff is just based off of the Anunnaki. It's just based off of the Anunnaki, and it's slowly just morphed and changed and condensed and become centralized. And here we are. I just saw a video the other day of Vladimir Putin, doing some kind of cold plunge baptism or something.
Cold plunge baptism? Really?
Yeah, something weird like that.
We got to find that.
Yeah, yo.
What was that all about?
I don't know what it was.
Do you think he knows about the Anunnaki?
Well, what I was going to say is before he did it, he did a little Hail Mary cross, because he's Eastern Orthodoxy over there.
Right.
So I'm just saying, this is how pervasive this has become.
Oh, yeah, wow, look at that. Oh, yeah. Look at that.
With a big cross right there. Look at that.
Is that him? Who's that guy? Yeah, that's a big thing in Russia. Yeah, they wear the wool hats when they do it. They do the cold plunge in the sauna. It's a big Russian thing. But this is all for Jesus Christ. Wow, dude, I didn't know this.
Yeah, so it just shows you how pervasive all of this is. I mean, religion is still a huge part of our world. I mean, he's one of the leaders of the not so free world with a finger on the nuclear button, and here he is still indoctrinated by this stuff.